What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. If you're wondering why I'm in this little bit interesting getup, if you're watching on YouTube, it's because we are recording on Halloween night. It is another Hey Chris episode, but my first question to Chris is, what was your son's costume for this year?
Do you have gloves on? Did I see that right?
It is an entire getup. It is
Oh,
an entire
boy.
getup.
You are full on. Did you go out somewhere?
No. I put this on for the pod. This is my dedication to the podcast.
I thought maybe you went to a Halloween party and you got dressed up or something like that. Oh my God, that's hilarious.
Nope. I will be editing this podcast after this with gloves on. However, I will do that. I do not know. We will see. We'll find out.
Elliot was a firefighter, technically a fire chief, because on the back of his firefighter costume, on the coat that he wore, it said fire chief. So he had fire boots, he had his fire jacket, he had his fire helmet, and he brought around a little horn. So he had a great time. Everybody in the neighborhood was loving his costume. Everybody was so excited to see him, and he did so much better this year than he did last year. Last year, he was kind of like at a point where he sort of knew what was going on-ish, but he didn't have a full understanding of it. Ethan, we had been practicing at home for 2 weeks. So this was his moment tonight. This is what we were practicing for. This is what we were game planning for. And he knocked it out of the park. He hit a wall because his little legs wanted to go all around the neighborhood. And we got to probably about 45 minutes in. And he said, "Dada, carry Elliot?" And I said, "Yes, buddy, I will carry you home." But he was a firefighter, and he had been wearing that costume for days in anticipation of Halloween, and he finally got to enjoy it tonight.
Chris, I don't think he was just wearing it in anticipation of Halloween. Based on our conversations, Elliot wears his fireman hat at least all over the house, right? I need more background on this, right? This is his time to shine. The costume that he likes to wear regularly, he now not only got to show out to his family, but to the whole world or the neighborhood or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, man, like one of his favorite things to do down in the basement is just play fireman. So he has all of these fire trucks, I think 19 of them at this point. 19 fire trucks, all different sizes. But he has this one that is really, really big with a really big ladder. And he likes for me to take his Lego guys and place them different places down in the basement so that he can save them. He can use his little fireman person, climb the ladder, and that person can save whoever it is, and then he drives the person away with his sirens on. So it is one of his favorite things to do, but he will not play fireman, and he will not play with his fire trucks unless he has his helmet on, unless he has his fireman gloves on, and unless he's got the fire station set up somewhere down in the basement, so that when he saves the people and he talks to all the people, he says, "Fireman Elliot here to save you, okay, climb down the ladder," all those different things. And then once he puts them in the fire truck, he drives them to the fire station for safekeeping. It's hilarious. It's his favorite thing to do. I would say like 70% of his life is spent wearing a firefighter helmet.
My goodness. My mom posted on Instagram earlier today about like 2000 Ethan in a Dalmatians costume because she was Cruella de Vil, and I was like, dude, This is a throwback of all throwbacks. Like, but so Halloween's a good time, man. Halloween's a good time. People like to dress
Yes.
up, all these other things, especially the kiddos. I'm glad he got to walk around. I know you like getting your walks in and all those things. So a double whammy there for you, Chris. But in this episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast, we are going to get into the subtexters and get the questions from them. I did a little bit of a fun one today, Chris. I know it's a little skeptical because it's Halloween. I tried to make it intriguing for all of our subscribers and listeners, but I texted them. I said, the Cavs are at the top of the Eastern Conference, as we know, 5-0 record, their best start to a season since 2016. We don't want to get caught up in the small sample sizes thus far, but with it being Halloween and all, let's have fun and play the what ifs game. Just this once. Just this one time. Send us your takes for the season, along with any questions you have regarding the Cavs, getting off to the races. And hey, if you want to ask about our Halloween plans, go for it. And I gave a little caveat to start. I said, can you guess my costume? And some of these, oh my God. The first response that we got was Donald Trump. And I was like, I'm not going
to be Donald Trump.
Like, I stay away from politics in general. I went and did my civic duty today. I voted, but I'm not dressing up like a political candidate. I'm sorry.
That's amazing.
And I simply can't be Donald Trump. Okay, like that would have been very hard to pull off for me. I don't have the toupee or the wig or whatever to go with that. So
yes, the key discussion points that you want to avoid in life when it comes to podcasting, radio, anything like that: religion and politics. So I think that was a good call by you, Ethan.
Amen. Hey. Sorry to the subtexture that thought I might dress up as him. Sorry to disappoint, but that's a no-go for your boy. All right. The other one, that I got like multiple times, Chris, just because of some of our our latest podcasts, Jared Allen. And I really I love our subtextures, right? I love talking to them on a daily basis and getting into conversations, debates, all these different things. But they really, at like 3 p.m. when I was starting to get these responses, I really was like, I have this entire costume planned out. Do I go to my barber and get my twist taken out to make it into an afro to come in and be Jared Allen? Like headband and all. I got the headband in the back room. That's not the problem. It was getting the afro perfected. I don't think I had enough time to get that done.
But you have long enough hair to do it, right? If you take the twists out, it can probably get pretty close. Not Jarrett close, but maybe Summer League Jared Allen close, when all that speculation was that he shaved his fro or he got rid of his fro. You probably have enough hair to do that, but it would probably take a lot of time.
Oh yeah. I have the hair. I don't have. He gets a haircut on the sides that's like more bushy than mine. So like I have a fade. He just gets like a taper.
I got you.
So I couldn't. That would have thrown the whole costume off. I'm a perfectionist, so it would have been bad. But let's get into some of these questions. All right. Here's the biggest what if. And I'm going to start from the craziest to the most tame, because we're starting off the rails. Chris, what if LeBron came back this summer? We drafted Bronny, whatever else comes with it. Obviously, Bronny has been drafted, so trade for Bronny as well. But what are the odds?
Yeah, I don't think they're very high, to be honest with you. But here's the thing that I will say. Like, I will never say never when it comes to LeBron. And, like, if there is a place that I think he would leave Los Angeles for, oh, man, this is probably going to get aggregated everywhere. If there's a place that I think he would leave Los Angeles for to finish his career, to bookend it, it's Cleveland, and only Cleveland. I think he's going to play it out in LA. I think that's where he's going to finish his career. I think he's very happy there. I think his family is very happy there. And he obviously has Bronny on that roster in some capacity, albeit a two-way. So the Lakers have done right by LeBron ever since he went there. LeBron has done right by the Lakers ever since he went there. And I just think it's the most logical place for him to finish his career. But if he wants to go somewhere else, if he wants to chase one more championship, if he just wants a storybook ending with the best farewell that he can possibly think of, then Cleveland is always going to be an option for him. And I think that's the only place that he would leave Los Angeles to go to.
To be fair to the subtexter, I think I read the text wrong.
Oh,
It was talking about this past summer, like when Bronny was being drafted. And
so like, what if LeBron would have come back here?
Correct. And
that
I
was
think,
never happening.
Yeah, because the Cavs, like, as much as LeBron would have been able to force his hand, the Cavs were not drafting Bronny James with the 20th overall selection.
Not at number 20. If they would have found a way, if they thought it was a possibility that LeBron would have left Los Angeles and part of the allure could have been draft Bronny, then that would have required them picking up a second-round pick, because you're right. There was no way that they were even considering Bronny at number 20. There was no team in the NBA that was considering Bronny at number 20.
Yep, so glad to clarify that, to get that out. And for you aggregators, you're welcome. Chris just gave you a take anyway for your money's worth. But next question. What are the appropriate odds to bet on the Cavs winning the championship? And the back end to this subtext is Ethan is clearly going to be Jared Allen for Halloween, who sure as heck played like one of the best big men in the NBA last night, referencing our podcast the other day. So go give that one a listen, because apparently I was raving. But Chris.
Yes.
Obviously, we're going to talk about some things at the end of this podcast more related to tomorrow's game. But Orlando is their next opponent. They will be without Paolo Banchero, who sustained an injury that has him out indefinitely. And that opens up a different door for the Cavs against the Magic, obviously. And then they face the Bucks, who have struggled this season. I think they're currently in a dogfight as we record this in their game on Thursday night. So, Chris, this is a what if. The one time we're going to do this early into the season. What do you think the odds are of the Cavs winning a championship? For me, they're still not beating Boston yet. They're not there to that point, to that level, to that tier.
Yeah, I mean, I think Boston, Ethan, is on a tier of themselves. Like, not just in the Eastern Conference, across the NBA. I think there are other teams that are really, really interesting from the standpoint of, if you're into the gambling thing and you're trying to get favorable odds that could potentially hit if everything breaks your way, and you're trying to go a little bit off the board and not go with the favorite Boston, then I think the Cavs are worth a wager. I think the Phoenix Suns would be worth a wager. I think the Dallas Mavericks would be worth a wager. I don't know that there's anybody else in the Eastern Conference that stands out to me. You could probably get some really, really good odds on Philly, because Philly's 1-3 and Paul George hasn't played yet and Embiid hasn't played yet. And there's always that looming factor of, okay, how healthy is Embiid going to be? What version of Embiid is going to be there for the 76ers in the playoffs? Like, are they going to have to work their way in through the play-in tournament? So you can probably get some pretty favorable odds that could lead to a pretty interesting cash-out possibility down the road on Philly, just buying low on them. But I just think, you know, as long as Boston is in the Eastern Conference and they are as healthy as they are right now, and the belief is that they're going to get Porzingis back and he's going to be as effective as he's been in the past, I can't sit here and say that there's any team in the NBA that's going to beat them 4 times in 7 tries. That's the difference. Beating them once in a 7-game series, sure, teams can do that, no doubt. Push them to 6 games, maybe 7 games. Fine. Like that happens. That happened to the Golden State Warriors when they were a dynasty. They got tested by certain teams, but the bottom line is to beat them in a playoff environment, you got to do it 4 times in 7 tries. And I just don't think there's anybody out there that is currently capable of doing that. I think Boston's on a completely different level. I think they're so good offensively, and they have a good enough defense, especially in a playoff environment. And the other thing that they have going for them, Ethan, is that they've been there, done that. They're not going to be rattled. They're not going to be phased. They know how to handle playoff pressure. They know how to handle a playoff environment. Joe Mazzulla knows how to win the playoff chess match. So for that team to gain the experience that they gained last year by winning the championship, and being as deep and talented as they are, it's just, I don't see it. I don't see it from the Cavs. I don't see it from the Suns. I don't see it from the Mavericks. I don't see it from the New York Knicks. I think everybody in the NBA, again, never say never, but I think everybody in the NBA is playing for second.
I've said this already on this podcast. I've booked it, said this. You can say it again. I think the NBA Finals is going to be between the Boston Celtics and the Oklahoma City Thunder. That's who I think currently also the only other team in the NBA currently that is undefeated. OKC. Yep. OKC. And I just think they have so much depth. They have size. Isaiah Hartenstein's going to come back. That's going to pose problems for Boston if they match up in that series and have to go big on big. And if they're going to have to figure out if they want to put Al Horford out there instead of Kristaps or whatever for strength matchups against Isaiah Hartenstein versus Kristaps Porzingis, right? There's so many different wrinkles, right? Because it feels like almost every team of significance, at least one player on their teams is injured, right? Like everybody is going through something to start the season. And if you look at the standings, it feels that way. There are teams that are at the bottom of the standings that you would not have thought to be there. Currently, ahead of whatever the ending is going to be for this Bucks game, they're 1-3, right?
Yep.
The 76ers are close there, if not right there as well. I think it's an interesting start to the season for everybody, but like I said, and like we've said before, the Cavs got to take advantage of where these teams are sitting, how they're struggling, and banking wins against teams that are either hampered by injuries or simply just not better than them. But
yeah. So I have a question for you because I think that's an interesting point that you bring up. I think beyond Boston, like every team you can come up with a reason why they won't, right? Why they won't win the championship beyond the whole Boston thing. Like, does the Dame Giannis thing work? Is Doc Rivers a good enough coach? No. Oklahoma City, like, do they have enough experience? Do they have enough consistent offense outside of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? Philly, the health situation of Paul George and Joel Embiid, duh. The New York Knicks, their situation. Are they going to be as tough, as physical, as defensive-minded as they have been in past playoff series? Or this new style that they're adopting because of the personnel changes that they've made, does that make them too different and not good enough in that kind of environment? Indiana, are they good enough defensively? And then Orlando. They haven't won a playoff series together. Paolo Banchero going to be missing for 4 to 6 weeks. What does that do for their seeding? Are they going to have to play their way in through the play-in tournament? And once they get there, are they going to have enough offense? Because that was obviously a problem for them against the Cavs. And the Cavs are a great defensive team, so it's hard to sit there and say, well, it was a problem with Orlando's offense. But Orlando had a questionable offense throughout the regular season to begin with, and that was just exacerbated in the playoffs, and that's why they went out and got KCP for a little bit more spacing, a little bit more veteran know-how, and a little bit more three-point shooting. And then you flip it over to the Western Conference, and you keep going down that list. I'm curious, beyond the Boston thing, what do you think is the thing that could potentially hold the Cavs back? Like, what do you think is the reason for them to not win a championship?
I think it's really hard, right? Because if you were to ask me today, if Boston didn't exist, I would have the Cavs in the NBA Finals, right? If Boston didn't exist, that would be my team. But if because Boston does exist and having to match up with them, you talked about it, experience. Boston has
Mm,
been there, right? The Cavs, luckily, right? This is crazy to say. Luckily, they've played them in a playoff atmosphere. So you can't say experience doesn't fall into that category. Obviously, when they get to the NBA Finals, if they get to the NBA Finals, Eastern Conference Finals, that's going to be a
mm,
different atmosphere on top of itself. But the
right.
experience of playing against Boston in a 7-game series is insurmountable, right? Like you
Uh,
can't take that away from them. For me, it's does Kenny Atkinson have the ability to cut his lineup down, cut his rotation down, mix and match, especially when Max Strus comes back, right? One of our subtexters asked us a question that I think will become an entire podcast. Shout out to Anu from San Francisco. I'll get to the end of your text in a little bit, but
mm,
when Max Strus comes back, right? We
mm,
obviously understand that he is the projected starting small forward.
yep.
Does Dean Wade earn that spot in over the next 4 weeks? Right?
Yeah.
Does he compete for that? For that? Does Max Strus come off the bench and show a different life? Do you put Darius Garland on the bench? Do you do all these different things? Right? When this team is at full strength and
Hmm.
fully healthy after 6 weeks of Max Strus being out, are they going to be able to change what they've been doing efficiently, allegedly, to that point, right? Because 6 weeks is a lot of time. It coincides with what Kenny Atkinson had said about when he was going to get a good feel for this team. 20 games, right? And if 20 games is when Max Strus is going to be reevaluated, he might not come back exactly at 20 games. It might be a little bit later. But if Kenny Atkinson is getting comfortable with his rotations, with his lineups, with the guys and what they're comfortable with, and how they're able to play alongside each individual player on the team. If Max Strus gets thrown into that, how is he going to adapt? Is he going to think, well, maybe I have to give him minutes because he was going to be our starting small forward? Or does he change lineup around to, and the other question is, does Max Strus come back as the same player that he was with the same impact after an ankle injury that
Hmm.
is significant, right? Especially when you're talking about a shooter that needs lift to get his shot off at a high clip, a high volume shooter at that.
Hmm. See, for me, Ethan, it's the thing that I keep running into with the Cavs is I've got to see this team be competent on the offensive end of the floor in a playoff environment. And we can sit here and we can talk about the defensive minded teams that they've played against throughout the course of the last 2 years in the playoffs: New York, Orlando, Boston. But, as good as their offense has been here in the regular season, I know, everybody knows the playoffs are completely different. The Cavs during the regular season last year, their offense was middle of the road. Statistically, it was middle of the road. They get into the playoffs and they've got one of the worst offenses of any team in the playoffs. So I've got to see Darius and Donovan coexist from a stylistic standpoint in a playoff environment, right? I've got to see Darius have a level of readiness for playoff basketball that he hasn't shown throughout his career. I've got to see the Jared Allen, Evan Mobley thing not be a problem when it comes to spacing, when it comes to shooting, when there's so much game planning involved. The scouting reports are what they are. Teams try different things defensively that they don't necessarily try in the regular season. They're more willing and more able to exploit weaknesses and stuff. So, can the Jarrett and the Evan thing work together as well as it needs to in a playoff environment? So, I think it's great. The strides that they've made offensively, they're great. They're exactly what this organization needed. It's what this organization wanted from Kenny Atkinson. It's what the players believed were possible based on the talent that they have on this roster. But it's hard for me to just assume that it's going to carry over into the postseason when I just haven't seen certain aspects of this team, albeit in a different system, albeit with a different coach. I just haven't seen certain aspects of this team work well enough on the offensive end that makes me say, yes, they're ready for that. Or yes, they're going to be good enough for that. I think Kenny's going to have more solutions. I think Kenny's going to have more answers for these coaches and more counters. And I think the diversity of this offense is going to be important. And I think the creativity that they have offensively is going to be important as well. But I keep going back to, I got to see it first. I got to see it in a playoff environment. And to me, that's the biggest question with this team. That's the biggest thing that would stop me short of labeling them a legitimate championship contender.
And I get that, because that kind of goes back to what I was saying more so about if things aren't working, right? If Darius and Donovan isn't working, if Jared Allen and Evan Mobley aren't working, if those pairings aren't working, will Kenny Atkinson be able to separate them and know that, or figure out a lineup that creates better results and go to that consistently, rather than being like, okay, well, we got past the trade deadline, we're in the playoffs now, but this isn't working at the playoff level. It's not working to make a contention at the where they want to be, right? And if you give the quote unquote core four all of the confidence in the world throughout 82 games, and we're talking about getting to probably the Eastern Conference Finals, semifinals at this point. This is when this conversation is going to happen, depending on where they finish in the regular season. But if this is happening, it's been almost 100 games, right? Are you going to be able to change what you have believed in, what you've gotten comfortable in, what you've been able to do for that remainder of the time, because something isn't working in that direct period? We talked about J.D. Bickerstaff being able to make adjustments game to game, right? Is Kenny Atkinson going to be able to make those changes in game to a point where, to the point where the Cavs can be successful? But I think it's interesting, and I think that's something we'll have to look forward to, especially after this weekend, right? Because things change quickly. But just to wrap up the whole Halloween costume thing with our subtexters, Anu had the last guess that was different from everybody else. He said Moondog or Cersei. I mean, fantastic. No, I am Miles Morales from Into the Spider-Verse. So thank y'all for all your submissions. And the last question of the podcast, Chris, since we're going to end on a fun note, it's for you. And it's from a person that lives in DFW. He says, I want to know, what are Chris's favorite restaurants when he visits Dallas?
Oh, man. I got a bunch of them in Dallas, actually. I think one of them is called Provision CBD. It's a steakhouse. It's really, really good. Is that what it's called? I gotta make sure that that's what it's called. CBD Provisions. Okay, I was a little bit backwards on that one. So CBD Provisions. It's right in downtown, just off of Main Street, I want to say. They have really good, I'm a meat and potatoes kind of guy. I'm an all-American kind of guy. They have really good steak and potatoes. I'm not even going to pronounce the kind of potatoes that they are, because, they're like French and I would screw it up. We need Kenny Atkinson for the translation on that one. But CBD Provisions in Dallas is one of my go-tos. And then Pecan Lodge. Pecan Lodge is a barbecue spot. I believe that it was on a couple of different shows on TV. Brisket, awesome. Ribs, awesome. I've taken multiple people from the Cavs to Pecan Lodge with me. And I'm sure people that are listening in the Dallas-Fort Worth area are going to say, dude, it's Pecan Lodge. It's not Pecan Lodge. And I'm going to say, well, I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Cleveland. And we have with everything that we say. Cat, pecan. That's just one of our, I don't know if it's an accent, but it's one of our things. I guess you can call it an accent. It's a Cleveland accent. So Pecan Lodge is my other go-tos. Those are the two that stand out to me the most. Every time that I'm in Dallas, I go to CBD Provisions and Pecan Lodge.
as someone who's not from the Cleveland, Ohio area, you definitely have a slight little. Everybody from the Midwest definitely has a little accent. Some may be different than others depending on your state, city, whatever. But
Yep.
Cleveland definitely got its own little thing going on. But Chris,
Yes.
I'm gonna
The other
end
one's called, I think, Lockhart Smokehouse Barbecue. That's another barbecue spot that I've tried as well.
Chris, I'm gonna end the podcast with this. Right? You mentioned the French place that you frequent.
Yes.
Oh my God! And this goes back to a press conference that we had with Kenny Atkinson literally just yesterday.
Oh, shoot. There's another one. I don't want to leave my man hanging in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It's in Deep Ellum. It's called Komodo, I think, or Komodo. One of the two. It's like contemporary Asian. I think Komodo. Komodo?
See?
Komodo sounds better because it's a Komodo dragon. Yes, we're going to go with Komodo. So Komodo in Deep Ellum is also one of my go-to spots.
See, I'm glad that I'm not the only one that mispronounces things, that doesn't know what they're called now. It's maybe mine are a little bit worse because I should know, but it's fine. But in the press conference that we had with Kenny Atkinson just yesterday, a question was posed to him about how many languages he speaks, right? Because Kenny Atkinson, for those that don't know, played overseas in multiple different countries for multiple different foreign teams, right? So he knows English, obviously. He says he's not fluent. He deems himself to be conversational, but he also did coach on the national team for the French national team, right? So he said they weren't making any excuses for him. So his French is pretty good. So English, French, Spanish, Italian, but he also did some time in Germany, but he didn't pick up Dutch as much, right? that was the funniest part from the interview, was how many times this reporter went back to that topic, talking about, so what did you do in Germany if you don't know Dutch? If you don't know Dutch, because I think the question was posed at least 2 to 3 times, and it was just hilarious. So,
and he was asked specifically, do you know Dutch? Like, I did not have that on my bingo card for something that was going to happen in a pregame press conference at all throughout the course of the season. And it happened in Game 5 already. So I just can't wait to see what else we're going to come up with for Kenny Atkinson questions in pregame. Do you speak Dutch?
I mean, that's a question I would have thought would have been like a practice, shoot around kind of like question, like not in front of like everybody that flew in from LA to see Bronny and LeBron, and like all the reporters from LA and all the TV personnel. Like, it was, do you speak Dutch? And I was like,
yo, that almost got contentious too.
Yep.
That almost got contentious for a couple of different reasons. We'll just leave it at that.
There you go. But all right, we had fun on this Halloween episode. I hope y'all enjoyed it. But with that, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. If you want to ask any questions throughout the year, subscribe to Subtext. The way to do that: sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word stop. It's easy. But we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around, because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.